Offaly Libraries Comic Con 2021. It's part of our Crinú na Nóg celebrations, and our thanks go to Creative Ireland and the Library Association of Ireland for funding this day of events. I'd also like to say thank you to our panelists who are with me today. We have Dr. Joseph Kehoe from Carlow IT, and we have Joe Neary from Romero Games in Galway. Joe Neary is a senior QA tester, at Romero Games. And when not testing games, he is creative with painting in the real world and hosting a multiple award-winning radio show called Famous Last Words. We also have Dr. Joseph Kehoe, who has a PhD and is a lecturer in computing at IT Carlow. He is course director of the BSc in software development. His research interests include gamification, serious games, which are games for education and healthcare, etc., and agent-based modeling. So guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, well, we're really looking forward to this one. So yeah, thanks for joining us, but also for allowing us to broadcast this live and for recording it for those who can't be with us today. We are here to discuss the importance of video games. I have a list of submitted questions here ready to go. But we're also open to questions from anyone who's joining us here. So we have a few VIP members who are able to participate. Hi to you, by the way. Those of you who are joining us, we'd ask that you mute your microphone and have your camera turned off just so that we don't see you on the recorded screen. But you are welcome to type questions into the chat box, which we can see here, and I'll put them to the judges then as they come in. We might not have time to hit every question, but we'll do our best. Brilliant. So guys, let's get going. Is everybody ready?
Yes, I'm good to go.
All set to go.
Lovely, lovely. My first question, let me see. How has this year been for you guys from a gaming perspective? I'll put that one to Joe first.
This year has been challenging in a lot of different ways for a lot of some huge obvious reasons that everybody knows about, and some less so. My own experience, I've been working from home this whole year, so not getting to deal with my coworkers directly and not getting that social side of work as much has been quite challenging. The transition into working from home has been interesting, but now everybody's adjusted and it's good to go. I think from a gaming perspective, I've regressed to do that way more than I should be doing, because it's one of the few things that you can do inside, and it's been an incredible way to maintain contact with people who I'd usually say maybe go to the pub with or go to a place to go to a cafe with. Instead, I'll meet up with them in a game and we'll play something and we'll talk about. That'll be our cafe. That is our cafe stand-in. It's been really interesting.
That is an interesting point, actually. We might end up kind of coming back to that one. And what about yourself, Joseph?
Much the same. It's been hell on earth in many ways. Locked in. Trying to teach without being able to meet students is very difficult. So usually you can tell if someone understands what you're saying or not, whereas this year you have no idea if anyone's even listening or, are they wearing clothes even? You don't know. So it's
brings its own challenges.
Yeah, it's been difficult. I have to say, in terms of gaming, I haven't actually gotten to do that much. I've been worn out with work, to be honest. Teaching in person is a lot easier. All this teaching over Zoom is just very tiring. But we're almost there now. The year is pretty much done for me. Student results are in. We have the corrections. Students will be getting their marks next Friday, I think. And we didn't do too badly considering. So we're pleased, glad it's over, but pleased and looking forward to September, where hopefully we'll get to meet for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee with some people. It would be really good.
Yeah.
Lovely. And in the meantime, we have that whole stretch of summer where you can catch up with all the things that you didn't get to enjoy.
Yes, hopefully. Yeah.
Let me see. That brings me on, I suppose, as from the gaming world in general across the globe, have there been any developments in the last year that maybe might be of interest?
Joe or Joseph?
That can be open to the floor. We'll go to Joe first.
So there's one of the big things for gaming to me is the fighting game tournaments. So that's Street Fighter, Tekken, all those things. And those are one of the few parts of regular gaming that happens in person. Like usually people play video games through the internet, but fighting games have a difficult time with the online netcode. It's not quite there yet, technology to do things that quickly and maintain a steady frame rate, so it causes some problems. So that type of gaming always happens, the big versions of it always happen in a room somewhere, so a bar or a community center. People will meet up and play that game together, and the tournaments will happen, and there'll be thousands, maybe biggest ones in the world have a couple of thousand people. So those are always huge events that a lot of people go to and play. And much like actual sports, that can no longer happen. So it's been interesting seeing the transition from in-person fighting game tournaments to the online space, because that's something that they didn't really have the technology for, and they were kind of not dealing with it, but now they're being forced to deal with it because they can't do it offline anymore. So that's been cool. And now we see Japanese developers starting to adopt rollback netcode, which is going to hopefully address that. So that's been a big thing from my from my exact perspective. This is not a huge gaming wide thing, but this is from a Neary perspective, a very big development.
Well, that's perfect. No, I suppose that's like everything else. I suppose the gaming world had to adapt, and I suppose that is an exciting development because of all the things that it opens up.
And not specific to the gaming world, but obviously, as I was saying before, everyone has transitioned to working remotely, so that's been a massive thing for the games industry. But because that's so widespread and ubiquitous, I don't need to pick on that too much, because everyone's working from home now.
No, that's a good point. And what about yourself, Joseph? Anything to add?
Well, the big thing for me has been one of the projects I'm doing this year is research into using virtual reality. So I got one of these, the Oculus Rift, and I have to say this stuff is incredible. But maybe more so for me than other people. This was science fiction when I was growing up. In fact, this was science fiction when I finished college. When I started lecturing, this was still science fiction until very recently. So that you can now do full VR experiences is amazing. So when I started using that, I have to say I was overwhelmed. You can go up, you can tour the International Space Station. Well, other people can, I can't. I get vertigo up there. I did it once and had to stop and sit down. But it's just so realistic, and it's just
how real it is, yeah.
And it's just such a different experience. And the games in VR, I think they're going to cause big changes. No longer are you just sitting down. You're actually standing up, moving around, swinging your hands, ducking and diving to get things done. And the difference I found was pretty amazing. So I think VR, is going to be huge. My only qualm I have with it is the Oculus Rift is owned by Facebook. But apart from that, it's brilliant.
One of the cool applications that I had never thought of, that a friend of mine who is into architecture got into, is that architects are able to preview buildings before they've made them now. And it's actually even height, just the plans on a 2D surface are interesting and cool, but nothing compares to walking through the door. And I used to wait for the building to be done to do that, but now you can have this adjustment could be made. We could do all this. So you get to QA test your building, which is great.
Yeah. No, I have to say, the first time I tried it, for the first time in a long time, I've looked at it, and I just, after 30 seconds, I thought, this is going to be huge. Just the difference is just extraordinary. So that, and obviously AR is going to be big as well, which is augmented reality, where the glasses, not like that, you can see through them. And what happens is the 3D effects occur in the real world. So the characters will appear on your desk and jump from furniture to furniture. So you're actually in the real world and also there. So it's like the Pokemon games, except the characters don't appear on your phone. They appear in front of you in full 3D. So that's it's not quite where the virtual reality is, but those two things are just going to be, I think, going to be huge. But there's so many other things happening in games that it's kind of hard to pick. There's lots of things happening. But for me, that's the first time in a long time I was really just blown away by what I've seen.
And it's interesting that you say it was science fiction up until recently for you, but for an awful lot of people, it is still science fiction. They haven't experienced these things yet, I suppose. It's starting to come into us, as you say, with the likes of Pokemon Go and even Snapchat filters and stuff. They're starting to introduce these ideas. But and in libraries as well, we have VR headsets now that we can use for educational purposes, and we're all starting to get slowly familiar with these things, and it's showing how accessible they're becoming.
Yeah, no, it's going to be huge. You can travel around the world now. I mean, even now there's VR experience for anywhere around the world. You want to visit the pyramids or anywhere like that, you can do so.
So. All exciting stuff, exciting stuff. So that's talking about the present day. Let's go back a little bit. What I'm looking at two people here who have dedicated their careers to gaming. What made you get interested in them in the first place? Speaking about the importance of them. I'll put that one to Joe first.
My first interest in video games came from when a neighbor had bought a Sega Mega Drive at some point in either 1992 or 1993, and I was a pretty let's stay inside kid, so I was like, whoa, I was big into TV, so it's like, oh wow, a TV, but now I can interact with it and do things, and that was kind of like a mind-blowing experience for a 3-year-old to have. So, and that just branched off to me being into games forever, and that was something that I really wanted to get into and dedicate time to doing. I went off, started a career in something else, and then I set up a video game night in Galway, which was just some fun to do with friends. It was keeping going a tradition of a board game society in college, as well as, like I mentioned before, the Street Fighter tournaments had been happening around the city, and I wanted to set up a casual night in conjunction with those people so we could all sort of meet together in one place and play games. Eventually, that brought in some indie developers that were looking to promote their stuff to people, and we were looking to maybe get some legitimacy by having some indie game developers beta test their stuff with our group of people, because we were getting 30, 40, maybe 50 people a week on a good week. So it was like, oh, we get a lot of people in to play all sorts of games. It'd be cool if we could get them playing games made in Galway, because that's really cool, and that would be us contributing back, and maybe we'd get seen as a bit more legitimate than we had been. And then that ended up with being having a working relationship with a lot of the different independent game studios in Galway, and I tested a lot for all of them. And then the Romero Games came to the city and wanted to set up a studio, and I was in an actually pretty good place to put my CV forward, because I had a working relationship with all the game developers based in Galway, had a good reputation, and I had done it before. So I came quite well recommended, and that's was my entry into the industry, or at least in a formal sense. I had a few game credits in a few different places before, and shoutouts to Dark Side Detective and Spooky Doorway for my first ever one.
So it all happened quite organically for you, just something you grew up with?
Yeah, I didn't have a moment. I cannot recall the moment when I thought games are cool, because I've thought games are cool since, like, I think I was thinking things. I think it was it was always there. It wasn't something that came about while I was it's like, when did you get into TV? It's like, well,
yeah. Grew up with it, and there all our lives.
So I really like it.
That's really interesting. Then for Joe or Joseph, there, you must kind of have a slightly different perspective on it. Can I ask what got you involved, and how did your journey go?
I do. Rather embarrassingly, the first computer game I ever saw was Pong, which is almost the very first game. That kind of gives you a hint as to how long ago that was. Then I suppose we were growing up around the time of the Spectrum, the Commodores, Dragon 32. Now, we didn't have any. I don't think we could afford even those back then, but some of our friends had them. And we used to go to the video arcades. So Space Invaders up to, and then other games like Spy Hunter. I was a champion at Spy Hunter. I had to stop playing it in the end. One day I was in there and I was playing the same game for 2 hours. And I just said, what the hell am I doing? This isn't even fun anymore. So I just walked away. And whoever was behind me got to put their name up from the high score. And I never played it again. But Gorf, Phoenix, games that probably no one has heard of now, from 8-bit games, I suppose. So you can still play those. So anyone out there, I recommend you get one of these Raspberry Pis, and you can get that with your kit here, and you can install your console software on that, and that will play all the old 8-bit, everything from Atari, Sega, all the way up to PS1, PS2, even at this stage. So you can join in with those and see Donkey Kong. How can you beat Donkey Kong?
These are the addictive ones.
They were all addictive.
2 hours have gone before you even notice.
Yeah, but that's how I started. Then after I left the arcade, I didn't really see them again. I went to college. We had one Apple IIe in school, which I got to play with for half an hour in my 5 years there. That was my time on that. Then in university, I did computing. And then Doom came along, which blew our brains at the time when we saw it. Duke Nukem, things like that. After that, I kind of went sideways. My life never really had much of a structure, I'll be honest with you. If I said there was a plan, I'd be lying. But I ended up lecturing in the end for no good reason in Carlow. And I found that I really liked that. And then when we came to design, we needed a new course, and games stood out for me as something that will get students in and could actually be fun. So we set that up back in 2002, possibly. We were the first games degree in Ireland. We were one of the few in the world at the time. I think we were the only degree to get official backing from the Xbox team in Microsoft in the world, as far as I know back then. So that's how I got into that. I was course director of the games degree for a while, but in my time there, I've been sort of course director of lots of things, and I kind of move around a bit. So currently I'm course director of the software development. But then I got into gamification, which is doing nice things with games. You play games, you still have fun, but while you're having fun, good things are happening. You're getting healthier, or even if you're not getting healthier, you're helping to find a cure for cancer or something like that, just by playing games. And that, for me, is the kind of, I enjoyed games up to then, but then I thought, you can use games to do incredibly useful things. After that, I just got into gamification. And again, if I said there was a plan on any of this, I'd be lying. If there was Run My Life again, who knows what I'd be doing? I could be on a farm, or who knows, because I've never had a plan. I still don't.
Well, that's okay, because you ended up here with us.
Yeah.
And that brings us nicely into, you've mentioned gamification. And again, both of you have mentioned a few things there that I would consider to be the important elements of video games. And I suppose from that point of view, what benefits would you say can be found in games to gamers? I'll go to Joe for that one.
Games to gamers. I've already touched on the community aspect of it. Generally, like anything that you enjoy, there'll be other people out there enjoying the same thing as you, and you'll get together and form a community and play an ungodly amount of Street Fighter together for hours and hours and hours and hours. But that'll extend your social circle. It'll give you more. It'll give you another thing to connect with other people. That's sort of stuff around games. But probably one of the most beneficial things that games gave to me was a community of people to hang out with and enjoy. There's more tangible benefits, more real world positive effects. There's been multiple studies that show that playing games of a certain kind can help people work through mental problems, such as, I don't want to get into too heavy things, but post-traumatic stress disorder. People suffering from that can experience marked benefits from playing certain types of games, and that can add to the obviously in addition to actual proper controlled therapy, it can produce more beneficial results than without those types of games being introduced. So that's, I don't want to overstate that benefit, but that is real, and that has been studied, and there's been a connection proven. So that is an obvious benefit. It also helps with concentration, and it teaches you how to learn things, if that makes sense. There's definitely, this is probably going into gamification, so I'm not going to go too deep on it because someone else here is more qualified to speak on it than I am, but it can make learning fun, and it can teach you that in order to get over this obstacle, you need to do these 3 things, and then you will pass it. And if you then go back into the real world and like, there is this obstacle and I need to figure out what I need to do in order to get past it, it's very much it was a way that helped me contextualize the real world and helped me achieve a lot of goals by gamifying them, by making them map on to back to games. It also people that learn guitar in Guitar Hero, a musical rhythm game. It's quite a very simplified way of learning guitar. It gives you it basically shows you that, oh, you can learn a thing and your hands can become more dexterous, and that will go forward. So then you can pick up a real guitar, and it's going to start in a much more difficult place, but you will be like, oh, when I started the guitar game, it was impossible, but after trying, I got better at it. So now I can map that onto this.
Transferable skills, I suppose.
Yes, very much so. So those would be the main benefits that I can think of right now.
Well, as you say, you've already spoken to the social aspect of it, and
yeah, and that's what's good about games. Other people. It turns out it was people the whole time.
Yeah. Oh, that's a nice one. I suppose the fact that it has had to adapt in a world of lockdowns, and it gives us that virtual outlet, that virtual place to meet.
Yes, like the point I made before about the online games are sort of our stand-in for cafes, or sort of my stand-in for cafes. It's where I meet up with people that I haven't seen in years. It's been weird in one way, whereas I don't see the people that I would regularly see all that often, but I'm getting back in touch with people that I haven't seen in 4 or 5 years since college and stuff, and that's been its own journey. And they're both the same distance to the online cafe of random video game.
And Joseph, then, have you anything to agree with or add with that?
No, I agree with everything he said. I think fun is highly underrated in modern society. People feel guilty if they're having fun, and if they're not working, have to explain why they're playing instead of working. In reality, it should be the other way around. If you're not playing and you're working, you should have a very good reason for working. For, say, 90, 95%, maybe 98% of the existence of the human race, play was how you learned. There was no school. If you want to learn something, it was through play. The whole purpose of playing games is to learn. That's how you learned how to hunt, how to do things, how to interact in society, is through playing games. And that is the default setting for people. So what we do, myself included, in schools and in colleges, where you put people in rooms and you line them up at desks and you talk to them, it has been, studies have shown that of all the possible ways to teach, everything from just giving them the book to sending them to YouTube to teaching in a class, the worst way of teaching by far is putting people in the classroom and talking to them. And one of the reasons for that, one of many reasons, is it's just no fun. If you're not having fun, you're probably not learning. I mean, so don't underestimate the power of fun. It's there for a reason. The reason we have fun is to make us engage in certain tasks that we need to do. And most of those tasks are related to learning new skills. And that's what the purpose of that is. And that's where games come in. They tap into that. And that's what we should be using them for.
That's, I suppose, so the benefit to you is just that we enjoy them. We just have fun.
Enjoy them. There's other benefits as well if you get into gamification, but even just enjoyment, it relieves anxiety. It helps you relax. It does so much for you. I just think we're stuck at the moment that if you're not working 60 hours a week, you need a good reason to explain why. Why aren't you working late in the office? Whereas I think we need to realize that's just crazy. If you're not playing on your computer, you need a good reason to explain why. If you're not out playing and having fun, then you need a really good reason. You must be doing something very important, because that's what we're designed for. That's how we learn. It's how we interact. It's how we get things done.
That's interesting. And we've mentioned a couple of times now this idea of people learning through video games. And you've mentioned gamification. Can you talk a little bit about the actual applications of that idea? Especially Joseph, yourself, that's something you've studied quite a lot.
Okay, yeah. Well, gamification is basically taking elements from games, and these are the elements that make games addictive, and putting them into other applications to make those applications more addictive. So when people play games, they get into the zone, or into the flow, as it's called, where you just keep going. You lose all track of time. You're just having fun. You're living in the moment. With gamification, the idea is you take the elements that hopefully cause that, and we're still doing research to work out what those elements are, and then you apply those to something like A good example would be Duolingo, which a lot of people are familiar with for teaching languages. If you look at the gamification elements of that, the main ones are known as PBL. So points, you get points for doing something. You get badges. So you get silver, gold, and bronze badges as you do certain things, as you do certain quests. And then L for leaderboards. So you up in the top 10. So those things combined, the idea is you add those like Duolingo, and suddenly when you use that, I say when you play it, I suppose you are playing it. So when you use Duolingo to learn a language, you'll notice that it comes up and it tells you, you've got this many points today. Do you want to see who else got this many points today? And it shows a list of people who are around the same area as you are. And it becomes addictive. And then you have your winning streaks. You've used this 4 days in a row. One more day, you get your 5 days in a row winning streak badge. And so that gets you to keep coming back to use it. So those things. Now, it's still early days, so we're still working out which of those are the most addictive, if any. But I mean, it's basically digital crack cocaine. That's the idea. When you put those things in, then people become addicted to it, same as you become addicted to drugs. Mm. And that's good and it's bad. So bad examples would be things like, okay, this has been recorded, so I'll take that back. Other examples where you can use this are things like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where you have stuff like the like button and you have friends and so on. And then they're there to make that addictive. So you put up an article, you keep track of how many likes you get. And if you're on Twitter, every time someone retweets, it gives you a little beep to your phone. That's a little hitting the endorphins in the brain and getting your brain reacting to that. You can't help that. The brain just automatically reacts. And then you get into this addictive cycle and you keep looking back, where am I on Twitter? Whereas my next tweet has to be just as good. How many followers do I have? Okay, who else has that many followers? So it's being used in a lot of places that I don't personally like. So in academia, it's being used. I've seen it being used everyone gets a Scopus ID, which is a unique identifier. And that when you publish, it tracks all your publications and it gives you a score. And then you can compare your score to everyone else on the planet, which is a really bad idea. Because if you compare yourself to everyone else on the planet, you're guaranteed there's going to be a lot of people who are way ahead of you, no matter how good you are. Unless you're the very best, in which case you're not interested in Scopus because you're a Nobel Prize winner. There's going to be someone ahead of you. So it gets you to keep coming back, to write more papers, to get to increase the number of links and the number of citations. So for the moment, I refuse to get a Scopus ID in the college. Keep pressing me to get one, but because I know how gamification works, I don't want to get in that treadmill of doing comparisons. It's like when you do comparisons again online with everyone in your class, and everyone seems to lead this wonderful lives. And this year we traveled here, we did this, we did that. They're a bad idea as well. You shouldn't read those because you make comparisons between how you're doing and how they're doing. They're only giving you the highlights, whereas for your own life, you have the complete story, the ups and the downs. So you have to be careful with gamification. And for me, that's using gamification for applications for helping people with stroke recovery. So for stroke recovery, you have to do certain exercises. If you have a stroke, it affects your muscles, your nerve connections, you lose coordination. So you have to repeat certain exercises to get your coordination and your strength back. So you can turn it into games. So an example that we did for a previous project, where we took one of these grip things, which is to improve your grip. What we did was we put a little pressure sensor there. We literally taped it on with sellotape so that when you pressed it, the sensor would bend and it would tell you you're bending or not. Then we took a Flappy Bird, the game, which most people are familiar with, where you click the button to make the bird flap to go through the obstacles. And then we hooked it up to the pressure sensor. So now to make the bird fly, you have to keep doing that. And before that, your therapist would come in, right, do that 10 times. They'll keep doing it, and you get bored after 2 goes. You go home and you don't do your exercise. Whereas you hook it up to a game, suddenly you can have high scores in that game with other stroke patients as well and people you know, and you can keep track of your progress. You can compare it to other people. You can get a high score. And then you'll keep going. I mean, I did it myself when I was in. I don't actually use these. But when it was rigged up to Flappy Bird, myself and my colleague, Oisin Cawley, who was working on it, the two of us started playing against each other, and our arms were getting sore. We just wouldn't give up. So it does have an effect like that. So for things like that, it's very good. So it's a matter of the application. Now, the jury is out in a lot of these things as to what makes it addictive or not. So we're still working on that. But that's the main idea.
But it's interesting because I suppose we all grew up with this idea that, oh no, you'll sit in front of a screen there all day and it's bad. But maybe by applying these things to the real world, we've realized what are the good and the beneficial elements, and maybe the elements that we just need to learn how to manage. So I suppose, it's interesting to see the applications in the real world, though.
It is, yeah. My last prop, I've all these lined up in front of me, is this book, Reality is Broken, by Jane McGonigal. She makes games and she does research into games, and her thesis is we can save the world by playing games. So she gives examples of games. So there's a game called Folded, where it's a puzzle game where you have to fold structures. Those structures are actually proteins. And protein folding is very difficult. Computers are not really able to do it very well. They fold at certain points. And when a protein folds, it takes on a certain shape. That shape decides how it interacts with cells. So if you can work out how to fold the correct shape in a protein, you can get cures for diseases, because that's what the cures are. You bind to cells. So by putting up these puzzle games, people play the puzzles, which are addictive. And every time you solve a puzzle, what you've actually done is you've folded a protein in the best possible shape. So you've worked out what the shape of this is. So that's an example where you use that, and then those proteins can be used to help find cures for diseases.
That's, in fairness, when we're talking about the importance of video games, that's probably the most concrete example of one, isn't it? Yeah. That's all the other examples are just as important, I suppose. And I suppose in terms of us with our everyday lives, as you say, we're not aware of all these things. And the fact that it has become something that's just second nature now, we don't even notice the gamification elements and the things we're using every day. But Joe, how would you notice kind of these things, you who has more of a perspective on it than us?
Sorry, was that question for... Did you say Joe or Joe?
Joe? Yeah, no, we can go to Joe.
I was, I'm obviously less qualified to speak on this, being not a professor of gamification.
No, but you might notice these elements in everyday life.
I myself had difficulty getting back into exercise after 10 years of not exercising. A friend told me to download Strava, which is an app that tracks your progress and gets everyone in your area that uses Strava to see your progress, or people that you've friended. You can see their progress, they can see your progress, but you can also check on other people in your area. It also keeps track of how fast you ran that last thing and how long you've been running for, and what your fastest 10K of all time is and what your fastest 5K is. So now I've become someone that runs 35 kilometers a week from someone that didn't run at all like 2 years ago, but through the power of gamification. And I think Joseph talked about a treadmill. Well, this is almost a literal treadmill of just, it gets you on the path and it'll keep you doing it. I think there's tremendous, it could be a force for tremendous good as long as we are careful with it. As has been pointed out by Joseph, things can go. It can make anything addictive, and that's a problem. But it as long as the power is used for good and not evil, it's all good. As like anything, it's a very useful tool, and it could be used to do great good things. But there might be a tool that is basically, it is a tool like any other, and we should use it correctly.
Exactly, I suppose, and that's where the research is so important, to identify exactly what elements we need and which ones I suppose we don't. And that might bring us on to a question about the future. So we've already talked about VR and augmented reality and everything. What would you like to see happen with all of these new technologies and new research discoveries that we're coming out with? I'll bring that one to Joseph. It's a loaded question, so take your time.
That's a difficult one. Again, I would lean heavily on the fun. Concentrate on fun isn't a bad thing, rather than doing applications just to make money. Now, I think a lot of people in games are like that anyway. Like people who work in games, they have a vision of what they want to do. It's kind of like we used to say everyone has a novel in them. So the young people there, everyone has a game in them, almost the same thing. So they have a vision for what they want to do, and that's not always guided by commercial. It's just their artistic vision of what they want to say, and that is a really good thing. So if we can keep going at that, as long as the games industry doesn't lose that, that would be really good.
Creative industry.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of technologies, I used to be able to tell many years ago. I could point at something and say, that's going to be big, that's going to be big. Then maybe 10 years ago, I stopped being able to do that. There were just so many things happening at once. I do think after trying the VR, just the first time I tried it on, I just thought it's just a technology. It's just going to be huge. This could be a bit of a game changer, literally, for how people play games. So I think that will be big. Now that's because I'm familiar with that. There's lots of things happening that I wouldn't be familiar with in the industry. The other thing is there are more different types of games, more narratives, if you like. Whereas before there was a time where it seemed like everything was about zombies. Now we're kind of moving slightly away from that. Now we've even the zombie games have more narratives to them. So was it The Last of Us? I mean, when that came out, I know a lot of people who cried at the end of it.
Too much people haven't played it, so.
But that was kind of a first, that people realize games can make you do that.
Yeah, you get invested in them a little bit more, I suppose.
Yeah, there's different things to be said. It's as if in literature, every novel ever written was about zombies. You'd miss out on so much else. They're may not be as popular as the zombie novels, but they're just as important. So there's going to be different types of games. I'm hoping that spread will continue and there'll be room for everyone. Whatever your genre is, there'll be room for you in there, and everyone will be able to follow their artistic vision and come up with something for its own sake, not just do things just which we have a tendency to do in society at the moment, just whatever is the biggest profit margin.
That's interesting. In libraries, we say that there's a book for every reader. Whatever you're looking for, there is a book somewhere for you. So
exactly,
just saying, hopefully someday there'll be a game for every gamer.
Oh, yeah, or even non-gamer, a game for everyone. I would hope so. Yeah.
Any thoughts on even what Joseph said?
So it's like just said originally, it's so hard deciding where technology is going to go. Like that's going to go in some unpredictable way. The Internet 7 is coming out soon, and we're all going to figure out what that means for everything. It's trying to predict the technology is almost impossible, but I am incredibly excited by the lowering of the bar to get into game development. The things like the Unity engine, whereas before, if you wanted to license a video game engine, it was going to be a price that would cut most people out of that market. And then Unity, many years ago, came out with a game engine that you could download for free, and you wouldn't have to pay the money unless you made over a certain profit margin. So the lowering of the bar and making it so that anyone can make a game is sort of the thing I'm most excited about. So that maybe that will help in getting to the thing Joseph mentioned. There will be a game for every person because every person will have the ability to make a game. That is something I'm very, very excited about. And it looks like that's the way we're going at the moment. So that's hopefully we'll get there before things go. Hopefully we get there without taking too many turns before then. There's hugely encouraging things coming from the younger generation at the moment. One of the biggest games that I've never touched or played or anything had anything to do with is Roblox, which is basically a game making toolkit for kids, and that is incredibly popular. So seeing when you have an entire generation of, hopefully Roblox maintains its popularity, or things like it maintain their popularity, because then we're going to see what happens when I guess in terms of books, like the next generation, it seems like everyone's going to be able to write. So but games now, so it's like that's going to lead to so many creative things. As Joseph already said, there's there's more games of different types being made now than any time before. We're exploring such different avenues with games, and I think there are ways to tell stories in books that don't work in films, and there's ways to tell stories in films that don't work in books. And I think we're going to find the ways that stories can be told in games that don't fit other mediums but are unique to games, and more powerful for doing so. I mean, when you experience a story and your suspension of disbelief is suspension of disbelief is achieved, and you're controlling that character, you can experience loss a bit more keenly. There's a game called The Walking Dead that deals with, or The Walking Dead. It's a adaptation of some of the comic stuff, but it deals with loss in a way that I'd never gotten from any other type of fiction before. I thought it was really cool that the game could make you feel more keenly sad at a character's death than you would have.
I think everybody has a bit of experience with that, actually, whether it's Red Dead Redemption or something else. You are the character. You're having to deal with the problems that they're dealing with. You're not passively looking at them on a screen or in a book.
It dissolves a little bit more of suspension of disbelief than I've achieved before. So I thought that's incredible, and I look forward to more video games exploiting that mechanic from but I look forward to that becoming more, and to the next version of that being found. And I'm just really curious to where it goes from a creative standpoint, because the technology thing I can't even bear thinking about. It's going to I'll be 65 and I won't recognize the world anymore.
Well, it's an interesting one to grow up with something and to see it changing before our eyes. It's interesting. And you guys have mentioned there a few times about the younger generation coming up. As you say, even in libraries here, we host workshops, and we have all sorts of resources dedicated now to helping children, develop their gaming skills and their software development skills. But what would you say to people who want to do what you have done, which is dedicate your lives to this and to the important elements of it? Any tips for anybody coming up? I think I know what Joseph is going to say. Play.
Maybe, but yeah, it's hard for me to give tips because as I said, I've never had a plan. I'm the worst. How I got here, I don't know. But get involved. You have to play. Play is probably the right answer. Try things out. If you think you're going to enjoy making a game, have a go at making a game. It doesn't have to work. It even crash. It doesn't matter. Every time you try, you'll get better. So you can make the first 100 games you make might not be any good. The 101st could be the winner. That's how it is, and that's how it is with everyone. No one comes in their first go at something to get it right. That's just never happens. Despite what you might read on the internet and the papers, that's all lies. People spend years trying things out, finding their way. So don't be afraid to explore. Explore different ways of doing things. Look into the different parts. Is it the art you're interested in? Is it maybe the modeling? Maybe it's the programming. Try them out and find out which you like. And whichever one you like, that's probably the one you're going to want to do. You should try to do things you enjoy.
That's a good one. And Joe, any tips for anybody who would like to try it out for life?
So my entry to the games industry was, as I mentioned before, not really that standard, and I don't think it's a path somebody else would be able to successfully emulate. But I think if you wanted to get into the games industry, one of the best ways I've seen is we now have a lot of different education courses in Ireland that you can apply to, a lot of different colleges. There's Pulse College, there's also courses in universities like CIT, and I've heard UL has a good one as well. Actually, CIT has a pretty great reputation among people. I've worked with Darren Sweeney came out of CIT, and he's great. He was I'm just going to call he was a good egg. He was really good at what he did. So there, the games industry has matured to the point where having a degree is a huge advantage, and you should definitely consider going into the education side of it to try and build up those skills. I believe it's totally possible for someone to enter the games industry without that. I know a lot of very successful game developers that have done so. But it never hurts to have a degree, and that'll give you the framework you need to go into the avenues that you want to pursue. Also, it never hurts to download Unity, and as Joseph said, just start making a game. Just start. You don't need to be employed making games to make games.
That's all really interesting, guys. And if you don't mind, I know that we're coming up to our 45-minute mark, but we've had a couple of questions coming in, if that's okay. Do you mind if I throw them to you?
100%.
So the first question is, what is your favorite game ever? So that is a big question. Whoever can think of it first can go first.
Stunned silence.
I don't know.
I can say which game has given me the most enjoyment, and that isn't saying it's the best made game in the world, but Street Fighter has given me the game that is more enjoyment than any other. I've traveled to Scotland. I've met more people than through almost any other avenue of my life. I've spent a lot of time talking with people about it. I know like 40% of the people I regularly hang out with, I've met at some point through this thing. Street Fighter led me to setting up the board game night, which led me to getting a job, which is now how I pay rent. So thank you, Street Fighter. You've made my landlord very happy.
I'm not going to be able to answer this. Whatever answer I give, as soon as I say it, as soon as this finishes, I'm going to think, oh no, that's not it, it's this. I'd be inclined to go back to the early games because those are the ones that I first came across. And then, I don't know, Gorf maybe. It's a bit of an outsider. If no one has ever heard of it. Gorf oh yeah, okay. One of those, possibly, maybe Mr. Do. Has anyone heard of that?
No.
I've not heard of Mr.
Go around, eat cherries or throw apples at things or balls. No, never mind. It's a silly game.
It's totally valid. Just because we haven't heard. That's still
like
huge. I don't think you can give a wrong answer, but I totally understand the
I'll have to go back
second you say it, you'll have to think of something else. That's why I copped out and said, oh, this one, because it's objectively on a graph. I can be like, oh, here's the most.
Yeah. It's like when people ask us what our favorite books are. Like it depends on the day and the criteria and in what sense. Yeah. But it's interesting to hear your reasoning behind each one of those. And Joe, yours brought us on to the next question that came in there. So do you think that board gaming will remain popular, especially now with more offices in homes and online games taking over?
I believe it will. I'm a huge fan of board games, and I think they are coming into their own in Ireland now. I think in Europe and America and a lot of other places, board games have been hugely popular for a very long time. But Ireland only seems to, or at least my experience, maybe I was in the dark on this, and then 10 years ago it all came to light. But I joined the Fansai, which is the board game club in NUIG, and I learned of this whole huge ecosystem of very interesting board games. And since I've started getting into it, it's gotten more and more popular, and it's going to continue. It seems like it's on an upward trajectory. In Galway City, there's a very popular board game cafe called Dungeons and Donuts. There's probably going to be another one at some point. Like, these things are popping up all over, and I hope they maintain their popularity because they're good. I believe they will. What was the actual question? Because I ended up spiraling into a crazy thing.
No, you answered it. Do you think they'll remain popular? So
I do believe it will remain popular. One, board games are great, and two, because I would be sad if it stopped.
I agree with Joe. I think to have their own dynamic. We were playing face to face with people. There's a whole social aspect you get when you're sort of physically in the same room with someone playing a game. So I think they're going to become more popular.
And one of the interesting things, learning a new board game is fun, whereas you don't really learn new video games. You sort of pick up and you sort of usually know how to do it already. And the games that you do have to learn, the video games you do have to learn, are very board game like. So it's got a cool dynamic.
Yeah.
I suppose board games require a little bit more imagination in that sense. It's always going to be a board with pieces, no matter how accessorized it is.
Yeah, and that's cool. That's a really cool design challenge, and it's so interesting to see what people do with I don't want to call them limited resources, but given a board and some pieces, people have made 1,000 different things. It's almost as if saying, here's a piece of paper and a pencil, and it's like, well, there's technically a limited amount of things you could do, but it's so cool what people make with board games. I look forward to stealing the designs.
Well, guys, thank you so much for that. That's good. I think that's the end of all of our questions for you. I just want to finish up by saying thank you so much to the people who've joined us, but also but also to yourselves for joining us here at the Offaly Libraries Comic Con. I'd like to just take that opportunity to say thank you.
Cheers. It's been a pleasure to be here. This has been great. Thank you so much for having us, or me. I'll let Joseph say his own thing. Sorry.
Yeah, it's been great. I've sort of been more nervous about this than I have been given invited papers and international conferences. This is the highlight of my career, going to a Comic-Con.